outside is still held in the soft velvet embrace of the deepest night. And as you settle into your blankets, imagine a small stone workshop nestled at the edge of a sleeping village, where the air is cool and the stars are beginning to fade into a soft, hazy gray. Inside the weaver's room, the air is thick with the comforting, clean scent of raw wool, dried flax, and the faint, sweet dust of the loom, all lingering in the quiet space like a soft, invisible blanket. A single, small candle casts a dim, rhythmic orange glow across the heavy wooden beams and the long, hanging threads, creating a space that is perfectly safe, perfectly warm, and perfectly still. You are invited now to let your own breath slow down, to match the steady, peaceful beat of the resting world, and to drift away into the gentle, repetitive motions of the weaver's quiet day, feeling perfectly safe and perfectly still. Chapter 1. The weaver stirs in the quiet dark long before the sun has thought to crest the distant, sleeping hills, his eyes opening slowly to the familiar sight of the heavy oak beams above his head, and he feels a deep, heavy sense of calm as he pushes back the thick wool blankets to stand on the cool, solid floorboards of his room. He dresses in the dim light, his fingers moving with a quiet and practiced memory over the soft linen of his tunic and the worn leather of his belt. And the house remains entirely silent around him, a stillness that feels like a kind and gentle weight pressing softly against his skin as he moves toward the workshop where the threads are kept. He walks with soft, rhythmic footsteps across the stone floor, the transition from sleep to work marked by the cool touch of the air and the faint, sweet scent of the wool that waits in its baskets. And he enters the workshop where the candlelight is already dancing on the walls. In the center of the room stands the great wooden loom, its heavy frame reaching toward the rafters like the bones of an ancient tree. And the weaver reaches for his first task, which is the slow and meditative preparation of the bobbins, small wooden spools that will carry the color across the warp. He selects a bundle of wool dyed a soft, deep blue, feeling the incredible springiness and the slight oil of the lanolin in the fibers, and he begins to wind the thread onto a spool, a slow and repetitive motion that requires no thought at all, just the steady rise and fall of his hand. Turn, wind, guide. Turn, wind, guide. And with every movement, the small wooden wheel makes a soft, whirring sound that is like the humming of a bee in a quiet garden. He repeats this many times, his mind drifting into a state of quiet meditation where the only reality is the texture of the wool and the rhythmic sound of the spinning wheel, until the spools are filled and ready to be used. Next, he turns to the loom itself, his fingers moving through the hundreds of hanging threads of the warp. each one a pale, strong line of flax that has been stretched tight and true. And he checks the tension with a gentle, plucking touch that makes a soft, musical note in the quiet room. He gathers his shuttles, those smooth, boat-shaped pieces of polished fruit wood, and he lays them in a neat and orderly line on the side bench where they catch the first pale light of the dawn, each one feeling cool and solid and reliable in his palm. The air in the workshop is beginning to brighten as the first hint of gold filters through the narrow window, casting long and soft shadows that stretch across the room to touch the far corners where the empty baskets and the piles of raw fleece wait in their own patient silence. He feels the coolness of the morning air on his face and the warmth of his own steady breath, a perfect balance of sensations that makes him feel grounded and safe, anchored in a moment of time that belongs only to him and the quiet preparations of the day. There is no hurry, no need to rush, for the threads are long and the day is wide. And so he lingers over each small task, checking the harnesses of the loom, or simply standing still and listening to the deep, resonant silence of the stone walls. His breath is slow and steady, matching the pace of his hands, and as the world begins to wake with the first soft light, he feels a deep and abiding contentment, knowing that everything is in its place and the day is unfolding exactly as it should, one slow and gentle movement at a time. He touches the edge of a finished piece of cloth, feeling the incredible density and the way it holds the heat of the room. And then he moves to the bench of the loom, the wood feeling warm and familiar against his legs as he prepares to begin the day's beauty. The stillness of the workshop is like a liquid, filling his mind and washing away any lingering fragments of dreams, replacing them with the solid, comforting reality of the wood and the wool and the light. And he is ready to begin the slow dance of the shuttle, moving through the morning with a heart that is quiet and a spirit that is perfectly at rest. Chapter 2. The sun has climbed a little higher in the soft blue sky, casting a warm and buttery light across the weaver's loom, and he begins the long and meditative process of passing the shuttle through the open threads, his hand moving slowly and deliberately from left to right. He presses his foot down upon the wooden treadle, hearing the soft, rhythmic creak of the leather hinges as the warp threads shift and open, creating a small, triangular tunnel of light for the shuttle to travel through. And then he sends the wooden boat sliding across the gap with a gentle, fluid motion. The shuttle makes a soft, shushing sound as it glides over the flax, a sound like a quiet sigh or a distant wave. And then it lands in his other hand with a tiny, muted thud that signals the completion of the pass. Slide, catch, beat. Slide, catch, stitch, beat, and he pulls the heavy wooden bar toward him, pressing the new thread into place with a steady, grounding force. He repeats this cycle again and again, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm of the loom. And he finds that his mind becomes as quiet and clear as the air above the clouds, far away from the noise of the world. He touches the surface of the growing cloth with his fingertips, feeling the incredible texture of the weave, the way the blue wool interlaces with the pale flax to create a pattern that is as steady and true as the passage of the sun. He pauses for a long minute just to breathe in the earthy, clean scent of the fibers as they are pressed together, and he watches the way the sunlight catches the tiny, stray hairs of the wool, making them glow like golden threads in the dimness of the room. Next comes the changing of the color, the most quiet and delicate part of the day, and he takes a new spool of deep forest green, tucking the end of the thread into the edge of the weave with a slow and practiced twist of his fingers. He waits for a moment, watching the way the green sits against the blue, and then he continues the dance, the shuttle moving back and forth, back and forth, a pattern that has no beginning and no end, only the steady and hypnotic rhythm of his own breathing and the soft heartbeat of the wood. He leans his weight forward, his eyes following the movement of the shuttle as it creates a world of color and light, and he feels the warmth of the sun on his shoulders like a heavy, golden blanket, a comfort that keeps his muscles loose and his heart at peace. He does not rush, for the cloth grows at its own pace, and so he loses himself in the repetition, his eyes half closed as he listens to the soft rustle of the wind in the thatch and the distant, muffled sound of the village below. Sometimes he stops to just look at a single row he has finished, admiring the way the threads hold together and the way the light creates shadows in the tiny valleys of the weave. And he feels a kinship with every weaver who has ever sat at a loom and watched the day go by. The wool on his fingers and the dust on his tunic are a source of comfort, a sign that he has spent his day in honest work, and he feels a deep and humming peace that radiates out from his chest to his very fingertips as the hours pass in a blur of quiet productivity. He turns the heavy roller slowly, winding the finished cloth onto the beam with a soft, clicking sound that marks the progress of the day. And he sees the fabric growing longer and stronger, a testament to the patience of his hands. The light in the workshop is changing now, the bright yellow of noon turning into a soft and rich amber, and the dust motes in the air dance in the thick beams of light, moving in slow and lazy spirals that mirror his own repetitive movements. He is content to stay in this one spot for as long as the loom requires, a guardian of the threads who finds his greatest joy in the simple act of being present and still. And as he finishes the last pass of the green thread, He feels a profound sense of gratitude for the quiet life he leads, for the wool that warms, and the loom that builds, and the silence that listens. Chapter 3. The afternoon sun has begun its long and lazy slide toward the horizon. The light in the stone workshop turning from a rich amber to a deep, warm purple. And the weaver feels a gentle, sleepy fatigue beginning to settle into his bones. A warm and pleasant tiredness that tells him the work of the day is done. He begins the final, quiet tasks of the evening with a body that feels heavy and pleasantly relaxed. Moving through the shop one last time to gather his spools and return them to their proper places in the wooden baskets. He cleans the smooth surface of his shuttles with a soft scrap of linen, wiping away the faint dust of the wool until the wood is bright and glowing once more. And he places them carefully in their chest, hearing the small, final click of wood against wood in the quiet room. He gathers the leftover bundles of flax, the long fibers feeling cool and soft in his hands, and he tucks them away under a heavy cloth to keep them safe until the morning light returns to the workshop. He rises from his bench with a slow stretch, his joints feeling loose and warm in the fading light, and he begins to walk the small space of the room for the last time that day, checking the latches of the windows and the tension of the loom to ensure that everything is in its place. He moves to the candle, extinguishing the flame with a slow and deliberate motion of his fingers, watching the tiny curl of smoke rise into the air and disappear into the darkness, leaving only the silver light of the moon to guide his way back to his bed. The smell of the extinguished wick is a smoky, nostalgic scent that signals the end of the journey, and the weaver breathes it in with a sense of completion and peace, feeling the weight of the day falling away as the world prepares to sleep. He walks slowly back toward his small room, his footsteps making a soft, rhythmic thud on the floor, and he sees the first star beginning to twinkle through the narrow window, a tiny diamond of light in the fading blue of the sky. He moves with a slow and fluid grace as he prepares for rest, undressing with slow and practiced movements, laying his tunic across a wooden stool and feeling the lightness of his body as he steps into the cool, dark space of his bed. He climbs into the bed, the linen sheets feeling cool and crisp at first, but quickly warming to the heat of his body as he pulls the thick wool blankets up to his chin, tucking them in around his shoulders until he is encased in a cocoon of warmth and safety. He lies there for a moment with his eyes open, looking at the dim outlines of the room, the familiar shapes of the loom and the baskets and the table, all resting in the quiet dark. His muscles feel loose and heavy, every tension of the day mattress, and he lets his head sink into the pillow, his thoughts slowing down until they are nothing more than the gentle pulse of his own heartbeat. The silence of the workshop is total, a deep and liquid quiet that fills his ears and his heart. And he knows that the cloth is safe, the loom is still, and the world is exactly as it should be, safe and still under the watch of the moon. He closes his eyes and breathes in the faint scent of raw wool that lingers on his fingers. And as the house settles around him with a final, gentle sigh, he drifts off into a sleep that is as deep and nourishing as the fabric he has spent his day weaving. Sleep now. Sleep. Sleep.